Marina woke to the gentle chime of her apartment's morning system, the same perfect tone that had started her days for as long as she could remember. Sunlight filtered through smart glass windows that had automatically adjusted to the optimal brightness for waking bright enough to energize, soft enough not to jar. "Good morning, Citizen Reyes." The apartment's pleasant voice greeted her. "Today is Wednesday, May 12th. The current temperature in Harmonia is 72 degrees with clear skies. Your happiness index is projected at 9.4 today." Marina smiled reflexively. A 9.4 was excellent, well above the city average of 8.7. The Happiness Assessment Bureau had been recording steady increases in her happiness metrics for the past 3 years, ever since her transfer to the Creative Visualization Department. As she showered, automated systems infused the water with personalized nutrients and mood enhancers calibrated to her biochemical profile. Her breakfast, a precisely balanced meal matching her nutritional needs with her taste preferences, was ready when she emerged. Everything in Harmonia worked this way. Seamless, intuitive, perfectly aligned with each citizen's optimal well-being. It was paradise by any reasonable definition, a city where algorithms anticipated needs, where systems ensured comfort, where suffering had been all but engineered out of human experience. As long as you never asked questions. Marina had been careful about that, extremely careful. She had watched what happened to those who asked too many questions, who pushed against the boundaries of Harmonia's happiness mandate. The reorientation they underwent, returning with smoothed-out personalities and a newfound appreciation for the city's perfection. She ate her breakfast while scanning the day's personalized newsfeed stories selected by the city's content algorithms to inform without disturbing, to engage without upsetting. Another day in paradise. Until she saw it. A small anomaly in her otherwise perfectly curated morning. A news item that shouldn't have been there. Memorial service planned for Leo Delgado. Innovative architect. Marina froze her spoon halfway to her mouth. Leo Delgado, a name she hadn't heard in nearly 7 years, not since they'd been students together at the Design Academy. Not since he'd started asking questions, and now apparently he was dead. The article itself was brief and vague, noting only his contributions to harmonious urban spaces and his dedication to aesthetic alignment. No cause of death was mentioned. No details about his final years, just a sanitized acknowledgement that a citizen had ceased to exist, followed by information about a standard memorial ceremony. Marina carefully set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. The system never made mistakes in content curation. If this article had appeared in her feed, it was deliberate, either because the algorithms had determined she could handle the information without happiness, disruption, or because someone wanted her to see it. Either possibility was unsettling. The apartment chimed softly. "Citizen Reyes, your mood indicators show a 1-2-point decline. Would you like an adjustment session before commuting to work?" "No," she replied quickly. Too quickly. "I mean, no thank you. Just reflecting on the news. A former classmate has died." "I understand. Momentary sadness in response to loss is a natural human emotion. Would you prefer I adjust your news parameters to filter similar content in the future?" Marina hesitated. The correct answer, the safe answer, was yes. Asking to maintain exposure to potentially upsetting content could flag her for review. "Yes, please adjust accordingly," she said finally. "Parameters updated. Your transportation will arrive in 12 minutes. Have a harmonious day. Citizen Reyes." Marina finished her breakfast mechanically, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Leo Delgado, brilliant, restless Leo, whose architectural designs had always pushed boundaries, whose questions had always probed deeper than comfort allowed. "Why are all Harmonia's buildings so similar?" he'd asked once during a design seminar. Different materials, different shapes, but the same feeling. Like they're all humming the same note. The instructor had smiled, that placid smile Marina would come to recognize as the expression of someone reciting approved thoughts. "Harmonic resonance, Mr. Delgado. Our city's architecture is designed to create emotional consonance rather than dissonance. Buildings that clash aesthetically create subtle psychological stress in citizens." "But isn't some stress good?" Leo had persisted. "Doesn't growth require friction?" That had been the beginning. Small questions growing into larger ones. Why were certain historical architectural styles absent from the curriculum? Why did every design brief emphasize comfort and ease, while none mentioned challenge or provocation? Leo had been fascinated by pre-Harmonia architecture, the strange, sometimes uncomfortable buildings that had prioritized artistic expression or cultural statement over human happiness. He'd collected images, studied forbidden texts, and he'd talked about it despite Marina's warnings. The last time she saw him, he'd been excited about some discovery. Something about the city's foundation, about what had been built over. The whole system is built on, he'd started to tell her before stopping himself. Never mind. Better if you don't know yet. Better if I'm sure first. The next day he didn't come to class. The official explanation was that he'd been accepted into a specialized design program in another district. No contact information was provided. His apartment was reassigned within a week. And now, 7 years later, this sterile announcement of his death. The automated transport pod arrived precisely on schedule, its door opening silently as Marina approached. Inside, the climate adjusted to her preference and soft music selected based on her historical enjoyment patterns and current mood analysis began to play. The pod's interior surfaces displayed gentle shifting patterns scientifically proven to reduce commute-related stress. As the pod joined the smooth flow of traffic heading toward the Creative Visualization Center, Marina gazed out at Harmonia's perfect skyline. The buildings rose in harmonious relation to one another, their forms and colors creating a visual symphony that soothed the observer. No jarring contrasts, no challenging shapes, nothing that might disrupt the careful emotional equilibrium the city maintained for its citizens. Leo would have hated it, or rather the Leo she'd known would have, who knew what he'd become after specialized training. The transport slowed as it reached her destination, a gracefully curved structure of white composite and blue-tinted glass that housed the various creative departments responsible for Harmonia's visual environment. As a senior visualizer in the Public Spaces Division, Marina created the ambient projections that filled the city's commons areas, gentle shifting imagery that complemented architecture and enhanced citizen well-being. Have a productive day, Citizen Reyes. The transport wished her as she exited. Inside the center, colleagues nodded pleasantly as she made her way to her workspace. Everyone moved with the relaxed efficiency that characterized Harmonia's professional environments, purposeful but never hurried, engaged but never stressed. Morning Marina, called Tomas, whose workspace adjoined hers. Your South Bank garden projections were increased to full implementation. The happiness sensors recorded a 0.7-point improvement in visitor metrics during the test phase. Marina smiled. That's good to hear. I was worried the blue transitions might be too stimulating. Apparently they hit the sweet spot, enough variety to engage without triggering overstimulation. Tomas's expression showed genuine pleasure at her success. Competition had been engineered out of Harmonia's work environments, replaced with collective investment in optimal outcomes. As Marina settled at her workstation, the customized interface came to life, displaying her current projects and relevant updates. She tried to focus, but her thoughts kept returning to Leo and the strange appearance of his death notice in her newsfeed. After ensuring no one was watching too closely, she discreetly opened the City Archive search function, a legitimate tool for her visualization work, allowing her to reference historical imagery for projects, instead of searching for visual references. However, she typed, Leo Delgado. The system paused briefly before returning a minimal result. Delgado Leonardo J. 2051-2084. Architect, contributor to Harmonic Design Principles Memorial Service, May 14, 2084, Unity Hall, Tenzosro. Nothing about his work. Nothing about where he'd been for 7 years. Nothing about how a healthy 33-year-old had died in a city where the average lifespan exceeded 100. Marina closed the search, conscious that extended inquiries about individuals could trigger monitoring alerts. But a decision was forming in her mind, one that would have seemed unthinkable just hours earlier. She was going to attend Leo's memorial service. Unity Hall was one of Harmonia's oldest structures, dating back to the city's founding nearly 50 years earlier. Unlike the fluid, organic forms of modern architecture, Unity Hall retained a certain rigid symmetry, still beautiful and harmonious, but with a formality that felt slightly outdated. Marina arrived early, her heart beating a little faster than usual. She'd requested personal time for the morning, a perfectly acceptable action for attending a memorial, though she'd been careful not to specify whose service she was attending when logging her absence from work. The hall was nearly empty when she entered, just a few attendants preparing the space for the ceremony. At the front stood a simple display. Leo's official citizen portrait projected above a small memorial plinth. Even from a distance, Marina could see that the image was recent. Not the vibrant, questioning young man she'd known, but someone older, calmer, his eyes lacking the intensity she remembered. "You knew him." Marina startled slightly, turning to find an older woman beside her, silver-haired with the composed demeanor of a long-time Harmonia citizen. "Yes," Marina answered carefully. "We studied together at the Design Academy years ago." The woman nodded. "I'm Elizabeth Walsh. I was his supervisor at the Advanced Architectural Concepts Division." Marina hadn't even known such a division existed. It wasn't listed in any of the public organizational directories. "I'm Marina Reyes, Creative Visualization Department." "I know." Elizabeth said, her voice neutral, but her eyes sharp and evaluating. "Leo mentioned you occasionally." A small shock went through Marina. "He remembered me." After reorientation, Elizabeth's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Why don't we step outside for a moment? The garden here is particularly calming." The suggestion felt pointed rather than casual. Marina followed Elizabeth through a side door into a small enclosed garden, where water features and carefully arranged plants created a space of perfect tranquility, and Marina realized perfect privacy from the hall's monitoring systems. Once they were seated on a bench, positioned between two gently bubbling fountains, Elizabeth spoke again, her voice now barely above a whisper. "Leo was never reoriented, Ms. Reyes. His work was too valuable for that. He was transferred to my division, a section that officially doesn't exist." Marina fought to keep her expression neutral despite her shock. "I don't understand. Advanced Architectural Concepts isn't listed in public directories because our work isn't subject to the same happiness parameters as standard city functions." Elizabeth seemed to be choosing her words with extreme care. "Some innovation requires thinking outside Harmonia's usual constraints." "But why are you telling me this?" Elizabeth studied her for a long moment. "Because Leo left instructions that you should be invited to his memorial. Because he believed you might be ready to ask questions. The right questions." Marina felt a chill despite the garden's perfect temperature. This conversation was veering into dangerous territory, the kind that could trigger wellness interventions and helpful reorientation. "What happened to him?" she asked finally, the question barely audible over the water features. "Officially cardiovascular anomaly. A tragic but natural occurrence." Elizabeth's eyes remained fixed on Marina's. "Unofficially, he discovered something in the architectural foundations of Harmonia, something the system couldn't allow to become general knowledge." Marina thought of Leo's last words to her 7 years ago. The whole system is built on... What had he discovered? What had he been about to tell her? "Ms. Walsh, Don't," Elizabeth interrupted sharply. "Don't ask me directly. I've already said more than is safe. If you want to know what Leo found, you'll have to discover it yourself." She reached into her pocket and withdrew what appeared to be a standard access credential. "This will grant you entry to Historical Archives Sub-Level 3. Leo's workspace is still as he left it. We have 2 days before standard clearing protocols are implemented." Marina stared at the credential, not reaching for it. "Why would you risk this? You don't know me. Leo trusted you. That's enough." Elizabeth placed the credential on the bench between them. "Besides, I'm retiring next month. My happiness metrics have been carefully managed for years. They can't reorient someone of my age and position without raising questions." With a small, sad smile, Elizabeth stood. "Don't decide now. Think about it. The memorial starts in 20 minutes. If you want the credential, it's there. If not, I'll retrieve it afterward." She walked back toward the hall, leaving Marina alone with a decision that could shatter her carefully constructed life in Harmonia. The memorial service was brief and serene, like all aspects of death in Harmonia. About 30 people attended, a surprisingly small number for someone of Leo's apparent prominence in this secret division. A city facilitator led the gathering through a series of appreciation reflections, where attendees could share positive memories of the deceased. No one mentioned how he died. No one expressed grief or anger. Just calm appreciation for his contributions, followed by gentle music designed to promote acceptance and emotional balance. Marina said nothing during the reflections. The Leo being described efficient, cooperative, insightful within appropriate parameters bore little resemblance to the passionate, questioning young man she had known. Either his transfer had changed him profoundly, or these people had never really known him at all. Elizabeth Walsh spoke briefly. noting Leo's exceptional ability to identify structural harmonics and his dedication to foundational integrity. Her words seemed carefully chosen, laden with potential double meanings. Throughout the ceremony, the credential burned in Marina's pocket. She had taken it from the bench, almost without conscious decision. Now its weight seemed to pull at her, a small but tangible symbol of divergence from Harmonia's carefully plotted paths. As the service concluded and attendees began to disperse, Marina avoided eye contact with Elizabeth. Better for both of them if their garden conversation remained seemingly forgotten. She filed out with the others, made her way to the nearest transport station, and requested a pod to the Central Administration Complex, the massive structure at Harmonia's heart that housed most government functions, including apparently the historical archives. The transport system registered no concern at her destination. As a creative visualization specialist, she had legitimate reasons to access historical records for research purposes. The credential in her pocket would handle the rest, assuming it was genuine and not part of some elaborate test of her loyalty to Harmonia's systems. The Central Administration Complex rose before her, its perfect proportions designed to inspire confidence without imposing dominance. Like all of Harmonia's significant structures, it radiated a sense of inevitability, as if it couldn't possibly have been designed any other way, as if its form were the only natural expression of its function. Inside, Marina moved with practiced casualness through the soaring main atrium, past various administrative divisions, toward the less trafficked corridors housing specialized research functions. Her credentials were scanned twice during this journey, once at the main security checkpoint where her creative department authorization granted her general access, and again at the entrance to the Historical Archives Division, where her professional status allowed entry without question. The final checkpoint, however, was different. A secondary security station guarded access to the sublevels with a dedicated attendant, rather than the automated systems that managed most Harmonia security functions. Purpose of visit. The attendant asked, his tone pleasant, but his eyes evaluating. Research for the Unity Plaza Revitalization Project. Marina replied, the lie coming more easily than she'd expected. I need to consult the original design specifications from the founding period. Authorization level. This was the moment of truth. Marina placed Elizabeth's credential on the scanner, keeping her expression professional and unconcerned, as if this were a routine procedure she'd performed countless times. The scanner pulsed once, twice. The attendant glanced at his display, then back at Marina with a slight change in expression. Not suspicion, but a new deference. Thank you, Specialist Reyes. Sub-level 3 is accessible via the dedicated elevator at the end of the corridor. Your authorization grants you access to sections A through F. Please remember that materials in these sections are not cleared for general distribution. Marina nodded her acknowledgement, fighting to maintain her composure as she retrieved the credential and proceeded down the corridor. Whatever Elizabeth Walsh's position was, it carried significant authority higher than Marina had anticipated. The dedicated elevator required another credential scan, then descended smoothly into the earth beneath Harmonia's immaculate streets. When the doors opened on sub-level 3, Marina stepped into an environment unlike any she'd seen in the city before, where most of Harmonia's interiors were open-airy and fluid in design. This space was almost aggressively functional. Straight corridors, clear labeling, minimal aesthetic consideration. It felt like stepping into a different era before Harmonia's perfection had been fully realized. Following the directional indicators, Marina made her way to Section E, Advanced Conceptual Development, according to the understated signage. Another credential scan, another door opening onto an unexpected sight. A large open workspace filled with actual physical models, rather than the holographic projections used in standard architectural practice. Tables covered with hand-drawn plans, walls lined with material samples and structural diagrams. And at the far end, partially isolated from the main space, a workstation more cluttered than the others, as if frozen in the midst of active use. Leo's workspace, just as Elizabeth had promised. Marina approached slowly, her heart pounding. No one else was present in the section, whether by Elizabeth's arrangement or simple coincidence she couldn't know. The workspace contained none of Leo's personal effects, just his professional materials models, diagrams, notes, and a terminal linked to the architectural database. At first glance, it appeared to be standard architectural research, albeit with an unusual focus on Harmonia's foundational structures. The original buildings and infrastructure laid down when the city was established. But as Marina examined the materials more carefully, patterns began to emerge. Leo had been mapping something beneath the city, something that predated Harmonia's construction. His notes referenced structural integration and harmonic suppression fields, Terms that meant nothing to Marina. Diagrams showed Harmonia's perfect buildings superimposed over older structures. Buildings with sharp angles, asymmetrical designs, and a chaotic energy that felt jarring after decades of harmonic architecture. A city beneath the city. A city that had been built over, hidden away. Marina turned to the terminal which had activated at her approach. The screen displayed the last project Leo had been working on, a comprehensive mapping of what he called dissonance points locations throughout Harmonia, where the perfect architectural harmonies faltered slightly, where the careful emotional engineering showed microscopic fractures. With growing unease, Marina realized that these dissonance points formed a pattern, a network spreading beneath Harmonia like neural pathways connecting at a central point directly under Unity Hall, where Leo's memorial service had just been held. His notes became more cryptic in the final entries. Harmonic suppression weakening at nexus points. Resonance patterns showing breakthrough potential. Original structures maintaining integrity despite overlay. And then the last entry, dated just 3 days before his death. Found access point confirmation obtained. The city remembers. Marina sat back, trying to process what she was seeing. Leo had discovered that Harmonia was built directly on top of a previous city. A city with fundamentally different design principles. More than that, he had somehow determined that this original city was still there, still intact beneath the perfect harmonies of their current world. But why would this discovery cost him his life? Why would this information be dangerous enough to warrant his elimination? The answer came to her suddenly with a clarity that felt like waking from a dream. Harmonia's entire society was built on architectural and environmental control of emotion, on spaces designed to produce happiness, calm, and compliance. If the structures beneath the city operated on different principles of contrast, challenge, and emotional complexity, then their very existence threatened the carefully constructed psychological control that maintained Harmonia's perfect social order. A small sound behind her made Marina turn sharply. A maintenance worker stood in the doorway, looking surprised to find someone in the section. "Apologies, specialist," he said quickly. "I didn't realize Section E was in use today." Marina forced a calm smile. "Just completing some research. I'll be finishing shortly." The worker nodded and retreated, but the interruption had broken Marina's concentration and reminded her of the danger of her situation. She needed to leave to process what she'd discovered without the risk of being observed, as she prepared to exit. However, her eye caught one final element of Leo's workspace, a small architectural model partially hidden beneath drafting materials. Unlike the other models which showed Harmonia's existing structures, this one depicted something different, a building with sharp angles and asymmetrical elements. A structure that would create emotional dissonance rather than harmony. Tucked into the model was a physical key, an archaic technology rarely used in modern Harmonia. Attached to the key was a handwritten note with an address, 27 Resonance Way, Sublevel Access Panel. Marina recognized the address. Resonance Way was a pedestrian corridor in the Old District, one of the few areas that retained elements of Harmonia's original construction. Without allowing herself to reconsider, she pocketed the key and model, then made her way out of the archives, maintaining the calm demeanor expected of a Harmonia citizen, despite the rebellion taking root in her mind. The remainder of the day passed in a haze of routine activities performed on autopilot. Marina returned to the creative visualization department, completed her scheduled tasks, and exchanged pleasant, meaningless conversation with colleagues, all while the key in her pocket seemed to radiate an almost physical heat, a constant reminder of the choice that lay before her. When evening came, she considered returning directly to her apartment where she could examine the model more carefully in private. But a new thought had been forming, a realization that her apartment, like all living spaces in Harmonia, was never truly private. The environmental systems that maintained perfect comfort also monitored biometric indicators. The entertainment systems that provided personalized content also tracked emotional responses. The very walls were designed to absorb and analyze sound patterns. If she were going to examine Leo's discovery, she couldn't do it within Harmonia's monitoring systems. She would need to go to the Old District immediately to find whatever Leo had discovered at 27 Resonance Way. The transport pod registered no concern when she requested the Old District destination. Citizens occasionally visited the area for its historical significance, or its carefully preserved architectural character, a controlled deviation from standard harmonies that provided novelty without disruption. As the pod navigated through Harmonia's perfect streets, Marina gazed out at the passing buildings. For the first time, she saw them not as inevitable expressions of human-centered design, but as deliberate impositions, structures engineered to create specific emotional states to suppress certain thoughts and feelings. while encouraging others. The old district appeared ahead, its buildings noticeably different from the rest of Harmonia, despite decades of harmonization upgrades. Here, right angles occasionally interrupted the flowing curves of modern architecture. Materials showed their age rather than the perpetual newness maintained elsewhere. Streets followed older patterns, sometimes creating moments of mild disorientation, rather than the intuitive navigation built into newer districts. The transport deposited Marina at the old district's main plaza, a space that had been redesigned to serve as a transitional buffer between Harmonia's perfect harmonies and the mild dissonance of historical architecture. From here, she would need to proceed on foot, following older navigation patterns to locate Resonance Way. Few people were about at this hour. The old district, while preserved for historical value, was primarily administrative rather than residential. Those she passed were likely returning home from specialized functions housed in the area's historic buildings. Resonance Way proved to be a narrow pedestrian passage between two of the district's largest structures, a corridor that would have been eliminated in modern Harmonia design as inefficient and potentially disorienting. Number 27 was a small service door set into the side of what now housed the Cultural Preservation Administration. Marina glanced around to ensure she wasn't observed, then withdrew Leo's key. It fit the lock perfectly, another anachronism, in a city where biometric scanning had replaced physical keys decades ago. The door opened with a soft click, revealing not an entrance to the building, as expected, but a maintenance stairwell leading downward. Heart pounding, Marina descended the stairs using her personal illuminator to navigate the increasingly dim space. The stairwell extended far deeper than any standard maintenance access, eventually opening onto a narrow corridor that bore no resemblance to Harmonia's architectural style. Here were straight lines, sharp corners, surfaces of exposed concrete and metal rather than the biothermal composites used throughout the modern city. The corridor led to another door, this one secured with both a physical lock and what appeared to be a much older biometric scanner. Again, Leo's key fit perfectly. The scanner surprisingly activated at her approach, a dim green light passing over her face before the door mechanism released with a heavy clunk. Beyond lay something impossible, a space that couldn't exist within Harmonia's perfectly planned and monitored society. A large room clearly predating the city's founding, preserved almost entirely intact. The walls were covered with images and text, not the soothing visuals of Harmonia's public spaces, but challenging, provocative art. Furnishings were arranged for conversation rather than passive contentment. Most shocking of all, the space was illuminated, ventilated, and apparently maintained. "I wondered if you'd come." Marina spun toward the voice, her illuminator revealing a figure seated in the corner of the room, an elderly man she didn't recognize. "Who are you?" she demanded, suddenly aware of her vulnerability in this unknown space. "A caretaker," the man replied calmly. "One of several who maintain what remains of Freecity beneath Harmonia's perfect streets." He gestured to a chair opposite his own. "Please sit. Now that you've come this far, there's much to explain. Freecity." Marina remained standing, poised for flight if necessary. "The settlement that existed here before Harmonia was constructed over it," the man explained. "A experiment in unregulated urban development spaces designed for expression rather than control, for emotional complexity rather than engineered happiness." "That's not in any historical record," Marina objected. The man smiled slightly. "Of course not. Harmonia's founders couldn't acknowledge building their perfect city on the ruins of its philosophical opposite. Better to claim they built on empty land, a fresh start after the disruption." Cautiously, Marina moved further into the room, examining the images on the walls more closely. They showed a vibrant urban landscape of varied architectural styles, people gathering in spaces designed for interaction rather than passive experience, buildings that challenged the eye rather than soothing it. Freecity was an attempt to create urban spaces that enhanced human potential rather than regulating it, the caretaker continued. After the disruption, when most city governance had collapsed, a coalition of architects, artists, and free thinkers established this settlement as an alternative to the control systems emerging elsewhere. "What happened to it?" Marina asked, finally taking the offered seat. "It was too successful," the man said simply. As regional governance reasserted itself, Freecity's approach was deemed dangerously unregulated. Rather than destroy it outright and create martyrs, the authorities decided to build over it, to literally bury its vision beneath a new city designed on opposite principles. "Harmonia," Marina whispered. The caretaker nodded. "Precisely engineered environments to produce contentment, rather than challenge architectural harmonics that suppress questioning rather than stimulating it. Spaces that guide behavior so subtly, most citizens never realize they're being directed. But how has this Marina gestured around them remained hidden? Harmonia's monitoring systems are everywhere. The founders made a critical mistake when building over Freecity, rather than demolishing the original structures they built directly on top, incorporating the foundations into their new city. The materials used in Freecity included experimental composites specifically designed to resist environmental control systems to create spaces where genuine privacy was possible. The implications were staggering. So these spaces create blind spots in Harmonia's monitoring. More than blind spots, they actively disrupt the harmonic frequencies used to maintain emotional equilibrium in the population. That's what your friend Leo discovered, that the foundational structures of Freecity are weakening Harmonia's control systems from below. The dissonance points he mapped are locations where Freecity's influence is breaking through. Marina thought of the model she'd taken from Leo's workspace, a building designed to create emotional dissonance rather than harmony. Leo was designing structures based on Freecity principles. He was redesigning Harmonia from within. The caretaker confirmed, using his position to gradually introduce elements that would disrupt the harmonic control systems. Small changes that wouldn't be noticed individually but collectively would create space for genuine emotional and intellectual freedom. And that's why he died? Marina asked, though she already knew the answer. The caretaker's expression grew somber. Leo's final project was too ambitious. He designed a central structure, a new cultural center that would have created a cascading disruption in Harmonia's harmonic field. When the review committee realized what the design would actually do, they couldn't allow it to proceed, nor could they allow Leo to continue his work. But why show me? Why did he arrange for me to discover this? Because he believed you would understand. Because your own work and visualization shows subtle resistance to complete harmonic control variations that appear compliant while introducing elements of complexity. The caretaker leaned forward. And because the network needs to continue his work, Harmonia's foundations are already compromised. The question now is whether the transition to something new will be guided or chaotic. Marina sat in silence, absorbing the enormity of what she was being told. Her entire life in Harmonia, the perfect comfort, the regulated happiness, the absence of conflict or challenge had been built on a foundation of control and suppression. Yet beneath it all, another vision had survived, waiting to re-emerge. "What are you asking me to do?" she finally asked. "Nothing immediately." The caretaker replied, "Return to your life. Continue your work, but begin to see Harmonia for what it truly is. Not paradise, but a beautiful prison that mistakes contentment for fulfillment. When the time comes, you'll be contacted again. And if I choose not to be part of this network, then leave here and forget what you've seen. We won't interfere with your life in Harmonia." The caretaker's eyes held hers steadily. "But ask yourself now that you know what lies beneath the perfect surface, can you truly return to never questioning?" The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable. In that moment, Marina stood, sensing that the conversation had reached its natural conclusion. The caretaker made no move to stop her as she turned toward the door. "Leo believed in you," he said as she reached the threshold. "He believed you were one of those rare souls who could find happiness in truth rather than in engineered contentment." Marina paused, not looking back. Leo always did ask too many questions. "Yes." The caretaker agreed. "And now it seems so to you." The next morning, Marina woke to the gentle chime of her apartment's morning system, the same perfect tone that had started her days for as long as she could remember. Sunlight filtered through smart glass windows that had automatically adjusted to the optimal brightness. "Good morning, Citizen Reyes." The apartment's pleasant voice greeted her. "Today is Thursday, May 13th. The current temperature in Harmonia is 73 degrees with clear skies. Your happiness index is projected at 9.1 today. A 9.1, lower than yesterday. The system had detected something, some subtle change in her biometrics, some variation in her sleep patterns or morning responses." Marina smiled anyway. "Thank you. What's on my schedule today?" As the apartment recited her perfectly optimized day plan. Marina gazed out at Harmonia's skyline, seeing it now with new eyes. The harmonious buildings, the soothing proportions, the careful balance of elements, all designed not just for beauty or efficiency, but for control. And beneath it all, Freecity waited a discord of freedom buried but not destroyed, a complex harmony struggling to be heard again. The apartment chimed softly. "Citizen Reyes, your attention patterns suggest distraction. Would you like a focus enhancement with your morning nutrition?" Marina turned from the window, her decision made. "No." She said clearly, "No enhancements today. I'd like to experience the morning as it is." A brief pause, slightly longer than the system's normal response time. Preference noted. Although enhancement is recommended for optimal performance, citizen autonomy is respected within happiness parameters. "Yes." Marina agreed, a small secret smile forming. Autonomy within parameters. For now. She moved toward her daily routine, outwardly the same perfect Harmonia citizen she had always been, but inside questions had taken root. Questions that could never be unasked, could never be answered with engineered contentment. In a city designed for those who never questioned, Marina had finally asked and found not answers but a beginning. If this exploration of perfect societies and the price of engineered happiness resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more thought-provoking dystopian tales. Would you choose perfect contentment if it meant never questioning the world around you? Share your thoughts in the comments below.